Good evening, everybody. Remember the 5th of November, gunpowder, treason and plot. I see no reason why gunpowder treason should ever be forgot. November the 5th. It's the date that we remember something that happened in 1605. In England, that is the special night of the fall season, far more than Halloween, a bonfire night, Guy Fawkes night. Everybody has been collecting wood and making bonfires for days before, buying their fireworks, and then on November the 5th they get together in families or groups of people and light the fire and set off the fireworks, and we're remembering something that happened back in 1605. Guy Fawkes was the man who was accused of trying to set fire to the Houses of Parliament, but he really wasn't the instigator. He was just the instrument that the people used. Roman Catholic revolutionaries, angry because King James I was trying to persecute their faith, somehow managed to get into a cellar below the Palace of Westminster 36 barrels of gunpowder. See, on that day, on the 5th of November, King James was going to be there, and he was going to be there for the state opening of Parliament, and the idea was to blow him up and get rid of him forever. But somebody warned one of the peers to not be there that day, and of course he went to the authorities and told them, and the whole plot was foiled with just a few hours to spare. And so Guy Fawkes, who'd been hired to do the dirty deed, was caught red-handed as he was there in the cellar trying to set off the dynamite. He was arrested. He was in trouble for about 2 days. He was tortured for 2 days while they tried to get him to give the name of the instigators, who incidentally was one called Robert Catesby, and his punishment was to be hung, drawn and quartered. Now I leave that to your imagination, what that was like. Guy Fawkes knew it wasn't good, and he had the last word, because it's reputed that he jumped off the scaffold and broke his own neck before they could hang him on the noose. So November the 5th, the day that we remember when hatred was taking part in the world. Hatred of people, what happens when hatred gets into the hearts of men. So maybe it is a good reason to remember. But I didn't come just to talk about hatred and about November the 5th. I came to talk about Christmas. I came to talk about December the 25th. Now, November the 5th is a date in history when Guy Fawkes did his job, but Christmas, December the 25th, isn't necessarily the day when Jesus was born. It is the day that the Christian Church has chosen that we would celebrate his birthday and his coming into the world. So that's how we come to celebrate Christmas, and we do it in all sorts of different ways. And as I got to thinking about past Christmases, I remembered a time when I'd said to myself, it doesn't seem like Christmas. And then I think, well, why? What does Christmas supposed to seem like? Will you come with me as I go back and reminisce about several years and several events of Christmas during my childhood, during my adult life, and see if we can find an answer to that question. What makes Christmas seem like Christmas? Go back with me first of all, way back to 1941. A little girl with a twin sister, 5 years old, in war-torn England, celebrating Christmas. I'm sure that there weren't great piles of presents under the tree, as there are in many houses today, but I do have a very clear recollection of one present that I received. My twin sister and I each received a baby doll. It was very difficult to get things in England during the wartime, and I heard afterwards that my mum and dad spent a long time tracing where they could get two dolls. They wanted to be identical dolls. In fact, they weren't quite in the end. Mine was a little bit smaller, about 12, 15 inches, something like that. And it came with two front teeth, which were very quickly knocked into its stomach and there rattled around for the rest of its life. It had legs and arms that moved. It had eyes that closed when you lay it down. And it came replete with two outfits. One outfit, I distinctly remember, I was talking to my sister this morning and she remembered the same thing, that the one outfit was dark grey with a red trim on it, and it was an outfit for a little boy. But should I decide that on any particular day my baby doll was to be a little girl, then it had a pink outfit. And it also had a night dress which was reputed to have been mine when I was a tiny preemie baby. So there we are. And you know, all the details I can remember, I can't remember what I called it. Maybe it was never anything else other than doll. I don't know. Oh, one thing I should have told you about, this doll was breakable. It was made of, I can't think of any other word than pot. It wasn't exactly china. It wasn't exactly fancy like that. It wasn't porcelain, so I'll just say it was pot. But anyway, it was breakable. And you've guessed it, before Christmas Day was over, I dropped my doll. And its arm broke. And my dad somehow found some tape and taped it up, and it never did come off again. So good was the joint there. But as I got to thinking about this Christmas, I thought, wow, doesn't that show human love at its best? Two parents who searched high and low to get 2 dolls for their little twin girls, a mother who knitted and knitted and knitted, not just 2 outfits, but 4 outfits for our dolls to give us for Christmas. And then mine broke. I think she must have been heartbroken. But you know, I don't remember ever being chastised. That to me is human love. I thought of a line from a song, and I can't remember the whole song, but one line is, "Oh, for the joy of human love, brother, sister, parent, child." And that to me speaks that particular Christmas of human love and how great that is as we celebrate Christmas together. But let's move on 3 years to 1944. The war is still on. My family had moved by this time from the north of England into near Manchester, and of course Manchester was where all the aircraft factories were, and so there was frequent air raids, and we could often hear the buzz bombs going over. And again, you've guessed it, Christmas Eve, the air raid siren went. Now, we at that time were told to get dressed and come downstairs. That's what happened then when the air raid siren went at night. When we'd lived in Northumberland as younger children, I can remember we were put to bed in a cupboard under the stairs, literally, that being deemed to be the safest place. But there was no such cupboard in our house near Manchester. So we got up, we got dressed, and that particular Christmas Eve, we were sitting about 1 o'clock in the morning at the dining room table, my brother and my parents and my sister and we were playing Monopoly. But the thing that I'm reminded of then, again, is that word hatred. What happens when hatred gets into the hearts of men? So not a very good thing to remember, but nevertheless, that's what came to my mind. There is hatred in the world, as well as love in the world. My childhood Christmases were good. The war eventually was over. Eventually there were more presents under the tree. And oh, the joy, the year I got an orange in the toe of my stocking, because I never saw an orange till I was 5 or 6 years old. And we still continue that tradition in our home of putting an orange in the toe of a stocking. And we had a Christmas tree, and it wasn't lit with LED lights, it was lit with real candles, flames. We never did set the house on fire, fortunately. And then I can think of the one Christmas, I guess I was about 10 or 12, and still we weren't getting loads of presents, and certainly by the afternoon of Christmas Day, I'd looked mine over, I dived a little bit into the books, and believe it or not, I was bored. So I sat down and wrote my thank you letters. What a revolutionary idea, to write thank you letters, and that's what I would do on Christmas Day. So let's move on from my childhood years. Let's move on 20 years now, into 1965. By this time, of course, I'd grown up, I'd finished school, I'd been to university, I'd married my childhood sweetheart, Vernon. We'd been married for 7 years in 1965, and our 3rd baby was due. On December the 20th, Helen came into the world. And in those days, back then, we stayed in hospital 7 days when we'd had babies. So I was in hospital over Christmas that year. In fact, I was in a lot longer than that because I had complications, but the Christmas Eve stays in my mind. There weren't just 2-bed or 4-bed rooms, there was big rooms, big wards with about 10 beds on either side, about 20 beds in all. And that year the doctors and nurses, as they always did I'm sure, got together, made a choir, came round singing Christmas carols to us all in the bed. And there was I with my baby in the crib at the foot of my bed, and just as they got there, they were singing Away in a Manger. And somehow that really touched my heart as I thought about another baby born in very different circumstances. the day when God came into the world, God incarnate. I didn't understand it all too much at that time, but it really did touch me. And it reminded me of a song that we used to sing a lot in England. I don't know that we sing it much here, but it was called Love Came Down at Christmas. Let me share with you a few thoughts and a few memories of those years that our children were growing up. They were wonderful years, and we had many, many joyous Christmas together. Times of preparation, cooking food, buying gifts, and particularly the fun that Vernon and I had was Christmas Eve. We had 4 children by now. Stockings had kind of moved on to pillowcases because things were more, and we would sit on the floor after the children had gone to bed, make 4 piles of gifts, wrap them all individually, and of course there had to be exactly the same number in each pillowcase. They weren't all identical, of course, because some were for boys and some were for girls and some were for younger and some were for older, but gifts appropriate to the age and the sex of the child. And we had such fun, and at last they were all packed, and that was a highlight that I remember of Christmas, and packing stockings. But as I think back about all that time, I realised that God and the church were beginning to play a lot more central part in our Christmas celebrations. So on Christmas Eve, the whole family would go to family service about 6:30, 7 o'clock, something like that. We'd take them all, even from being very young children, off we would go to church. And then, of course, we'd come home and do all the things that the family does do on Christmas Eve. And then when the children were in bed and whatever grandparents were staying with us that year, they would stay at home and babysit while Vernon and I would go to communion service at midnight at our little Methodist church. Christmas morning would start quite early, though not as early as in some homes. I don't know if we trained our children particularly well or not. I remember the year that I'd spent in the hospital when Helen was born. Vernon had hidden a microphone in the cupboard in the room that Janet and Stuart were, so that I could perhaps hear something of what went on. And the very first voice that came on was a little 3-year-old Stuart saying, "Is that the time that Daddy said yet?" And various other things were said that are on our family tape that we call The Tape. And some of the things I won't share with you here because they're very humorous, and you might not find them humorous. But anyway, there were shouts of things like, "That's just what I wanted," and "Oh, look what I've got." And then the voice of the very perceptive Janet saying, "Oh, look, Santa Claus has got the same paper as we use." So things like that. And then a few years later, I think Vernon tried this experiment again of putting the microphone in the cupboard. And the thing I remember of that time is a little voice of little Richard saying, somehow my James Bond car hasn't come." Of course, he got it later because it was in his present from us, but he didn't know that. He was still thinking it was from Santa Claus. And of course, the children had sent their notes up the chimney to Santa Claus to tell him what they wanted. We did still do all that sort of thing and had fun doing it. So then, after the children had all opened their stockings, they would come all into our bed, and there we were, 6 of us all together. And of course, Vernon and I had stockings as well, and we'd spend time sharing and showing what we'd got. Then, after a very light breakfast and one present from the tree, off we went. Guess where? We went to church. It was Christmas Day, and we went to Christmas Day service at the church. Now, it was when we came home that the patience of the children was severely tested, because Vernon always insisted that we had our coffee and mince pies before we got to the gifts under the tree. And sometimes he would kind of play that out a bit and make it last a bit longer than the children thought was a good idea. So lots of good memories about our children growing up. But then let's move on another 10 years. Let's move on to 1975. This was a very different Christmas because we were very different people. We'd spent the year of August 74 to 75 in Canada when Verna was on sabbatical leave. We'd gone to the Wesleyan Church, Sunnyside Wesleyan Church, where Vernon and I had both taken Jesus as our Saviour and Lord, and the children had all accepted Jesus at Silver Lake Camp. So we truly were a very different family. And Christmas became a little bit different, because now we began to understand the significance of the song, Love Came Down at Christmas. Now we really were able to put together the fact that that baby Jesus who came down at Christmas was the same Jesus whose crucifixion and resurrection we were to celebrate every Easter time. Now we understood the significance of the cradle to the cross. And it wasn't a matter of just going to church now 3 times. It was a matter of going to worship 3 times. It was a matter of going to truly celebrate the birthday of a king. So I asked the question earlier, what makes Christmas seem like Christmas? Now, if I went out in the street and asked people, some would say children, some would say parties, some would say drinking, some would say it's about Jesus. But if I put it all into one word, I would say that what makes Christmas seem like Christmas is love. We've talked about the year that human love particularly came across to me. And we've talked about divine love and love coming down at Jesus at Christmas. But you know, if Christmas is only about human love, if it's only about children and family time and gifts and parties, sometime that's going to kind of evaporate, because the children are going to grow up and they're going to go away, and there's going to be years when we don't have children around us, and there are going to be times when we lose our spouses and we are truly alone at Christmas. And if human love is the only thing that makes our Christmas, Christmas is going to seem very quiet, it's going to feel very dull, it's going to seem very empty. But you know, it may be quiet, but when we bring divine love into the equation, when we truly remember that love has come down at Christmas in the baby Jesus Christ, then it becomes different, and it can still be the same. That's what makes Christmas seem like Christmas, when we bring the love of God into it in Jesus Christ. I came across a song quite a few years ago now, when I used to write Christmas programs for Sunday school. And I came across this song called There Must Be a Reason for Christmas. Listen carefully to the words. I wonder how you'll spend Christmas this year. Will your Christmas seem like Christmas? The year of COVID, it will always go down as 2020, the year of COVID. You may have made plans. They probably aren't the plans that you've had other Christmases for big parties and such like. You may even now have made plans, and even at this point, they might have to be changed. We just don't know. So how will you spend Christmas? But you know, Even if your plans are changed, even if you're on your own, even if you can't have your parties, nothing can take away from you the spirit of Christmas in your heart. Nothing can take away from you. Nothing can separate you from the love of God in Christ Jesus. We're not to add to the Bible, and I have no intention of doing, but if I did, I think I would add nothing but life nor death nor anything else in all creation, including COVID, can separate you from the love of God in Christ Jesus. We talked about remembering November the 5th, and perhaps it's good in a way to remember what happens when hatred comes into the world. We've talked about the reason for Christmas. The reason is that Jesus is Christmas and love is Christmas. And I hope you will remember the reason for the season. It's a bit of a trite saying that, remember the reason for the season, but nevertheless it's important, and I hope that you will remember it, and I hope that you will tell others about it. Happy Christmas.